What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about The Last of Us Part 2 sales dropping. Now, this is a story that really came out yesterday. I saw a lot of people on YouTube talking about it, the quartering geeks and gamers, especially. Honestly, a lot of those that are very opposed to The Last of Us Part 2. But I kind of want to go over what we know about the sales, talk about maybe some of my worries, but more or less give an analysis on it. I also want to really quickly after that talk about the thing that came out from Polygon about the basically Naughty Dog reaching out to the bad review scores. I think that's pretty darn interesting. So I want to talk about that at the end. So firstly, we have in the UK, the physical sales of The Last of Us Part 2 dropped by 80% in that week. Now remember, last week, or really the week that Last of Us came out, it was pretty much the highest selling physical game of the year in all these countries, like Germany, the UK, I believe was one of them. There was a lot, and it was, again, the top selling game. Now it dropped by 80%. So, I will be, open and transparent. I'm not going to call out. I actually watched the quartering. I like the quartering. I'm not going to call out anything they said because ultimately I didn't watch those videos. But if they were criticizing it, I do want to point out, and this article points out as well, Uncharted 4 dropped by 78% in its second week back in 2016. So The Last of Us Part 2 dropping by 80 when the Uncharted 4 dropped by 78 isn't that, it's not that massive. If Uncharted 4 went to sell on, Uncharted 4, I think still right now is the highest selling PlayStation exclusive, PlayStation 4 exclusive. Okay, if you combine The Last of Us with Last of Us Remastered, technically that is, I think it's over 20 million. But if you just do PS4 games, Uncharted 4 I believe is like 16, 17 million. So that's the number one. So if you have that game who went on to sell outrageously well, and obviously the end of Nathan Drake, my favorite game actually of all time. And again, I mean, if this is the first video you're watching, I don't really pick sides with this. I do definitely have my own opinions, and I've made them note, but I try to respect and understand both sides to all of this Last of Us Part 2 stuff, so that's kind of just where I stand on it. So, I mean, you can look at it as a bad thing. When anything drops by that big of a percentage, that's a big deal. Movies, routinely drop, that's for sure. The bigger the percentage, though, generally the weaker, right? You normally don't want a movie dropping. Normally, even movies from week 1 to week 2 drop like 50, 60, 70%, somewhere in that range. But games really aren't as reported on. It's mainly because The Last of Us Part 2 is such a big deal. Mainly, it goes on to talk about that ultra cheap 3DS game, the game that I think is like $249, right? And that game is outselling it, or is almost outselling it. So, like, it definitely isn't the greatest thing in the world. Here's what I'll say again. If you're looking on the positive side, it's, okay, well, firstly, it's physical sales, and physical sales across the board are down. Physical sales across the board have been down for years, and digital sales have been going up while physical sales are going down. So as long as the game sells digitally, it's not going to matter as much. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, the percentage drop compared to games like Uncharted. But here's what I'll say. When I first saw this story, okay, and I saw it like on YouTube, I think the quartering was the first time that I saw it on YouTube, and the first thing I thought of was Death Stranding. So again, to be fair to both sides, if you're like, hoorah, Last of Us isn't selling, that's fine. I mean, if you don't want to buy the game, don't buy the game. If you're going to buy the game, buy the game. That's basically where I stand on it. With Death Stranding, why do I bring up that example? Well, Death Stranding actually was one like this, an example like this, where, okay, the game came out, and it really, over the year before the game came out, it was propelled online, not necessarily by like fake hype and excitement for it, but the game definitely did well online versus sales. I think a lot of people were willing to watch the trailers, watch the gameplay, watch anything that came out about that. Because it is, I mean, even if you didn't like it, even if it's a game not for you, it's definitely interesting, right? It's definitely out there. It's not something you get every day. It is a kind of game that has kind of been done, or themes and elements have been done in like smaller indie games, but we've never gotten a game like Death Stranding, a AAA, really big budget game by Hideo Kojima like this. You know what I mean? It's never really been done like this. And the game did really well, again, like in trailers and views, basically, engagement online. When the game came out, it sold really well the first week. Okay, it sold actually extremely well the first week, but it completely dropped off the face of the earth after that. Now, was it because it was around Thanksgiving, Black Friday time, so anybody that was going to get it was going to get it day one and they didn't get after? Maybe, but in all reality, it was because the game was meant for a specific group of people, and even those that were maybe on the fence about it waited for week 1 to figure out, okay, is this game for me? Oh no, absolutely not. I'm not getting it. And that ended it. Death Stranding sold very poorly after that first week. It made, I'd say, the majority of its sales the first week. Now, it went on to, I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying it was a critical, like, disaster. Now, I'm not saying The Last of Us Part 2 is either. Honestly, I'm not. Because, again, Death Stranding, we're talking about overall sales. Overall sales, Death Stranding sold, I believe, 5 million units, but it really dropped after that first week. Was it because, and you know, when I say word of mouth, it's not because the game was awful. It's not because review scores. It was because people really finally figured out, those that were still on the fence, okay, is this game for me or not? You know what I mean? And a lot of people decided that this game, and the game absolutely, right, Death Stranding is not a game made for every person. Okay, now we go to The Last of Us. The Last of Us is like that, but now I will take the side of the negativity. It is a lot different too. So it is word of mouth, I'd say, this time. If the game starts to drop massively across the board, not just physical sales, because again, physical sales can be, you know, we can kind of twist it to fit a narrative. In general, I would say sales. If we start hearing, oh my God, the sales of Last of Us dropped 60, 70, 80%, and within like 2 weeks, it's just going to be completely dead. Another thing to think about too is Ghost of Tsushima. Does Ghost of Tsushima, when it comes out literally in 2 weeks and 2 days, does it take away everything? So it's The Last of Us basically only have 2 weeks left to sell anything, and then okay, obviously people are still going to buy it, but like it'll be thousands, right? It's not going to be hundreds of thousands. It's not going to be millions. You know, is Ghost of Tsushima really going to take away from The Last of Us? I think it will. I think it will kind of stop it dead in its tracks. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful. But if we start seeing that, you know, the sales are down across the board, not just physically, but everywhere, it would be a Death Stranding situation. But again, in a different way, where this time it's word of mouth of all of the stuff that came out with this game, the Abby stuff, the big leaks, the stuff that turned out to be true, all this kind of stuff, is because that made its way into people's thoughts, right? And also literal word of mouth is important. It's important for a movie. It's important for games. Even like if you take a movie example of Suicide Squad, I think, what was that, 2016 or 2015, whenever that movie came out, the movie did insane, and actually I think Batman vs. Superman did the same thing, did extremely well that first week. I mean, it broke, both of them broke records, but literally after that, people were talking about it, and it literally stopped people from going to see it, or people didn't go back to re-see, you know, whatever you want to say. But those movies, just like those movies, I'd say, are pretty close in comparison. Not, you know, everything is completely comparable, but those movies are very close to what I'm talking about with Death Stranding and The Last of Us, where you had the initial, you know, everybody who was going to see it was going to see it, and then everybody else heard about it, and that's really, again, where you make the money. And that is what I will say about The Last of Us. Again, I've talked about it. You know that I do love a lot of this game, and I do not like a few parts of it, okay? I want a third game. I want some things fixed in part 2, definitely, so you guys know where I stand. What I'd say is the people that were going to buy this game bought this game, and then the rest of the people that heard about it afterwards, it just was not going to happen. And a thing that does worry me about that is those do affect the next thing. So movies, when you have something like that, and again, a movie that's like very front-loaded like that hurts the possibility of a sequel. Not just does it hurt if the sequel comes out, okay, and the money that it's going to make, but it hurts the potential of getting a sequel. So again, we don't know these things, and a lot of these, and this is just the UK. Maybe we'll hear about the US and other territories over the next coming days or weeks. But again, say the sales are down everywhere. It's just absolutely terrible. Naughty Dog and Sony really need to look at themselves and say, all right, the gamble worked because we sold outrageously well. Like the first, the first 3 days it sold 4 million units. So the game will probably reach at least 8 to 10. Okay. Now I was saying that I think this game could get close to like 20 million. Now maybe that was too far out. I just kind of took Uncharted 4. Again, Uncharted 4 sold 15, 16 million. Last of Us Part 2, one of the most hyped up, one of the most games that people are most excited about in years and decades. It's actually I'd say what's one of the highest ever that has happened. Now again, the leaks obviously affected it, but I thought this game could get around 15 to 20 million. We'll have to see if that happens. It's definitely possible. Maybe Sony comes out in a week or so and says, okay, hey, the game reached 10 million units. I mean, that's already extremely well. And then give it another 6-7 months, give it Black Friday, give it PS5 sales, maybe it gets to 15, 20. You know what I mean? So I mean, I don't know. That's where I projected it. But Sony and Naughty Dog need to look at each other and say, all right, The game sold well, but it sold well the first week. It sold well with the people that we have in our pocket. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm in Naughty Dog's pocket. I'm not saying you guys are, but actually, in a way, we kind of are. Like, I saw the leaks. I wasn't very happy. I wasn't sure if it was actually going to make its way into the game, like what elements were going to do it. But I bought the game day one because, still, I was hooked, right? They had me hooked. Now, call me a sucker, call me whatever you want to call me, but I did that. They have to look at themselves and say, all right, it worked once, but when we make a part 3, which we will, I'm absolutely certain they will make a Last of Us Part 3, okay, with a TV show, with just the franchise expanding, all that stuff. I think they'll make a 3, and I think they'll make it a lot faster than they made 2. But they have to look and they say, okay, we have to change some things because we may not even get that. Again, that is definitely a worry when you have a franchise that maybe drops in terms of like money, in terms of how many people bought it, or when, again, it's front-loaded like this where a lot of people get it immediately and then people just stop getting it afterwards. I mean, now you're only working with that group, and you may not even be working with that group, right? You may actually have less people in that group for the next game. So that's something they have to think about. That's like, okay, say the game sells 12 million units, okay, like early on, like within the first month, 2 months, the game has sold 12-ish, somewhere in that, 10 to 12 million units. That's great. I mean, not many games can say that, right? Especially an exclusive where it's only on one console. That's an impressive, like, no matter what you say, that's impressive. But you have to look at that and say, okay, well, do we even have a guaranteed 10 to 12 million people that will get the third game? Or do we now have to kind of cut that in half because now, some of those people that bought it day one, they're not very happy. What I've seen I think what the quartering and all of them are talking about too is like it's on pre-order, or there's a lot of people doing like pre-owned stuff. So people are already had bought it and now you can buy it like pre-owned at a reduced price, and those are popping up everywhere. I mean, that could be it. People are buying it. People are playing it. They've played it for a week and a half, and then they're just done with it. I feel like that may happen with any. And it's only a single-player game, too. That's another thing you have to think about. When multiplayer comes, there is more value because there's reason to go back in and play it over and over again. So definitely there is a lot. I mean, obviously I spent the second half of this video talking about that. There is a lot to worry about with this game. And the last thing, just to kind of throw it in, the whole, that them reaching out to, I believe it was like Vice who gave it a pretty bad review, or like not the greatest review. That's weird, and they even said that in the article that normally that doesn't happen, and it's not like the message from the PR department was like threatening or like mean or really bad, but they wanted like clarification. They wanted them to kind of like rethink it. That you don't. I'll just say this. I'm gonna again take the side of this. You don't want that. I don't care how good or how bad your whatever it is your product is. I don't really think it's the greatest PR move out there, literally by their PR department, to go out and start reaching out to those that gave it mediocre or like below average reviews and saying, hey, did you really think this part through? Or, hey, why'd you actually give it that? Like, I don't think you really had enough clarification. Like, that is not, I mean, they didn't like it. They didn't like it. They gave it the score they gave it. They obviously, if they didn't play it, if you know that they didn't play it, then call them out. Okay, then say like, oh, hey, we gave you the code, you reviewed it, it got how, obviously people saw it, and you didn't even like do this or do that. But I mean, when you play through the whole game and when you have an opinion on the game, it's not right to reach out from the company. And we're seeing that. I mean, Neil Druckmann, Troy Baker, they're definitely going after. I don't like that. I mean, I liked Neil Druckmann. I like Troy Baker, but every passing day, I don't like them as much because, and not because of, not even actually, I'll say this, not even because of the game, but because of the things we're now hearing where Naughty Dog's reaching out to people, or Troy Baker and Neil Druckmann, they're basically saying like, hey, you can't have an opinion on the Joel stuff or on the story stuff because you don't care as much as we do. Well, I mean, that's your opinion. You don't know that. Yes, you created it, and there is something to that, and I get that maybe no one will ever be as close to it as you because you created it, but things like The Last of Us and just anything, but we'll talk about The Last of Us, it touches people in ways that you maybe don't even know. You know what I mean? Maybe it saved a lot. Maybe somebody was contemplating doing something bad and the game saved them. You know what I mean? And so the game can mean something very, very different to one person versus yourself. Even though you created it, that doesn't not give them the right to talk about it. You know what I mean? So those kind of things, the PR, Naughty Dog PR reaching out, Neil Druckmann talking about, hey, people just don't know. I mean, we were in the room. Troy and I were talking for hours. Maybe you could have talked for a little longer than a couple hours. You know what I mean? I don't know. And I'm not super going at them, but they have to understand that just because they made it doesn't mean we can't have opinions on it. That's how it works. And ultimately, they can, and what they should be saying, and what they probably don't want to say because they don't want this, is if you don't like it, don't buy it. Now, they won't say that. I don't think they'll say that because they don't want that. I mean, because if they come out and say, hey, if you didn't like what we did, you know what? Not only does your opinion not matter to us, but we would prefer you just skip the game altogether. That's not a good look. That's not a good look because ultimately, yes, it is a passion thing, right? And you make games for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons is you can't even make games if people don't buy them. So if people are not buying your games, you will not be in the gaming industry, okay? If you make video games and people don't buy your video games, you're not going to be in that job for that long. So yes, you do have creative freedom. You can do your own stuff, but you have to keep in mind that other people are buying it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing for music. It's the same thing for movies. Yeah, you're making the movie, but if nobody watches it, well, then you just wasted a lot of money and a lot of time. You got to make it for those. Same thing with even like a YouTube video. I can make whatever YouTube video I want, and I do. I make a lot of topics that I want to talk about, but if you guys don't watch, well, ultimately I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting, they're not getting views. They may lose subscribers. You know what I mean? It's not worth it sometimes. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but you have to make that choice. So lots of stuff Naughty Dog related. Not exactly pleased with the reviews, with what was talked about with with Neil Druckmann and Troy Baker and all. So let me know, guys, in the comments below. What do you think? What do you think about all of this kind of stuff? As always, make sure you guys are subscribed to this YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon so you guys know when these videos go up, and I'll continue talking about The Last of Us Part 2. I have a few more ideas I want to do, and also just like a video like this, if anything pops up, like a news story about it, I will definitely cover it on the channel as well, okay? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.